In a 2021 poll, the Pew Research Center asked participants about their views on the opposing party. Approximately 90% had a generally unfavorable view, 49% had a very unfavorable view, and 42% believed that the other party was so misguided in its policy making and beliefs that they were a genuine threat to the well-being of the nation. These numbers are devastating, but though they belie a deep and hardening divide between people on both ends of the spectrum, they may not come as a huge surprise. Political polarization has been intensifying for years now. And it's nothing new. For centuries, people have been divided into political factions, each faction having its own opinion on how the world should work, naturally spurring some antipathy towards people who disagreed. But there was generally space for consensus. There existed enough overlapping beliefs between the two factions that the type of bargaining and coalition building natural to multi-party democracy could work. Today, people are so far apart that they can't even begin to understand where the other side is coming from. There is no middle ground, and the idea of being friends with someone on the other faraway end of the spectrum seems absurd. I first became interested in politics in late 2015. Donald Trump's first presidential campaign was in full swing, drenched in controversy that seems tame compared to what lay ahead. Most of my information at the time came from social media. I used Tumblr, Twitter, Quora, and occasionally Instagram to keep myself in the loop. I learned so much from the internet, and I still believe it positively shaped my understanding of the world. It opened me up to new ideas and understandings about sexism, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, and how they intersect with our lives that I wouldn't have known otherwise. I developed a set of beliefs based on what I was seeing happening around me, and to 12-year-old me, they seemed fairly obvious. Of course, women deserved access to reproductive health care, and of course immigrants were human beings who deserve the same rights that we do. And the more petitions and backlash I saw against lawmakers or people in position of power going against these beliefs, the more confused I got. The general rationale in the online communities I've dabbled in was that people who disagreed with our beliefs were either uneducated and didn't know better, or evil monsters who hated anyone who wasn't a rich white male. But that never made sense to me. The people writing laws for our country were obviously highly educated people who were capable of making rational decisions. And if lawmaking was their job, they obviously knew more about the issues they were writing legislature for than I did as a middle schooler. And if they were so evil, why were people still voting them into office every term? I felt like there was something I was missing, so I decided to investigate. And almost immediately after Googling the bills in question or the statements in question, I realized there was a huge chunk of context or information that I was missing that my sources did not give me. Perhaps there was a clause in the bill that would have set a dangerous precedent for healthcare in the future. Or maybe the horrible, awful thing that was said was actually just a well-meaning remark that was taken out of context and twisted into something brutal. Even if I didn't agree with them, I mostly understood their thought processes and how they formed the conclusions I was so avidly against. It wasn't always just hateful or ignorant. And that was when I learned my first lesson in online media consumption. Fact check and don't believe everything you read online. Media is produced by human beings and therefore subject to human biases that may have intentionally or unintentionally leaked into it. This bias varies in scale. Sometimes it shows when headlines are framed in ways that certain facts or details are concealed. Sometimes the media will simply not report on things that harm their political interests. And sometimes things are deliberately taken out of context and misrepresented to the public. This happens on both sides. For example, replacing the word riot with protest, being hypocritical about what is acceptable and what isn't based on your opinion on the person, or even spreading fake lists of dead people who had supposedly voted in an election. Biased media does so well because of its controversial nature, and also because of the way the human brain is wired. Cognitive dissonance refers to the mental discomfort that arises when a person holds two contradictory viewpoints. When a person is presented with new information that challenges their core beliefs, they may feel threatened or uncomfortable. Confirmation bias is defined as the tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting only information that is consistent with one's existing beliefs. This means that people who are already politically aligned tend to engage most with media that supports their own worldviews, a subconscious effort to avoid the discomfort that would arise if their political beliefs were challenged. Over time, the subtle bias of the media can pull readers closer and closer towards extremism, and that is what leads to hyperpolarization. Something newsworthy happens, gets perceived extremely differently by left-leaning versus right-leaning news outlets, and now their target demographics suddenly have entirely different narratives or understandings of what actually happened. When you can't even fathom how someone forms the conclusions they do or holds the beliefs that they do, it's possible that they aren't seeing the same things that you are. This means that political disagreement may no longer be about a difference in values or priorities, but is literally about how people have completely different ideas about what is going on and are forming perfectly valid conclusions based on what they are seeing. People begin living in their own information universes, in their own bubbles, called echo chambers. The problem of echo chambers has only been exacerbated by social media and the algorithms that guide its functioning. Social media's main goal is to make sure you stay on the app for as much time as possible. This means that the algorithm that decides what users should be shown every day is designed to make your time on the app as enjoyable as possible. The more fun you have, the more time you're likely to spend, and therefore the more money they make. This means that social media companies are financially incentivized to block content that they think you might disagree with, or that might aggravate or annoy you, or could trigger cognitive dissonance in your brain. Instead, they push forward content that is similar to what you've shown them you like or agreed with in the past, maybe by favoriting, reposting, or saving. It blocks dissenting views and throws you into a world where it seems like everyone is just like you. The dangers of echo chambers are numerous. For one, it takes any little biases you may have and converts them into extreme, amplified versions of those opinions. This is an effect called radicalization. For example, a person likes a few posts about how modern feminism is toxic. The algorithm might decide that this person hates feminism and pushes more and more inevitably biased anti-feminism content at them. The more content they consume, the more extreme propaganda is recommended to them, and therefore the more extreme and radical their own views become. This is very evident with online conspiracy theories like QAnon or the election fraud claims of the 2020 elections. Echo chambers take a belief, amplify it, warp it, and then utterly convince people of its normalcy through gradual reinforcement, though to an outsider it has become so hostile and bizarre that it is no longer recognizable. Even if these beliefs start out with goodwill, we cannot have progress if our end goals become so divorced from reality that nobody outside the echo chamber can connect with us. Secondly, it means you never know if you are being blocked from seeing the full picture. When you log into social media and read a headline, you never know if it's being framed right or framed wrong. Third, it inhibits growth and the development of refined and applicable beliefs. Debate and disagreement leads to better informed and accurate viewpoints, the same way business competition allows both companies to grow in ways they would have never been able to if they just continued on with their original business models. Nobody knows everything, and by listening to people who disagree with you, you understand why they feel the way they do. Maybe there were points of view you had failed to consider, or maybe they have facts that you weren't aware of. Going back to the person in the anti-feminism echo chamber, not only are they being shown increasingly extreme anti-feminist content, they're also blocked from interacting with anyone who might narrate the other side of the story. It's a one-sided analysis of an extremely complicated issue, and not having the full picture prohibits the person from thinking for themselves. The notion that you can't be friends with someone unless you share their exact political ideology is untrue. Connect with people who share your desire to solve and address a particular problem, not just people who happen to have the same ideas as to how to go about doing that. For example, gun control. It's one of the most divisive issues in the US right now. One side believes that since criminals will find a way to access guns whether they're legal or not, means that ordinary citizens need to be able to legally access them too, so that they can protect themselves. The other side believes that since the background checks required to buy a gun are so lax that people predisposed to mental illness and violence can access them easily, means that ordinary citizens are under a constant threat. Both of these arguments focus on improving safety in America, and by working together, a better solution that incorporates both of these very valid perspectives can be devised. While exposure to opposing beliefs may trigger our innate fight or flight responses, it's important to engage with these opinions in order to effectively understand and address them. There is no real way to shield yourself from the effects of an echo chamber or media bias, but it's important to be aware of the possibility that the set of facts you've taken for granted could be incorrect, and it's important to be open to changing your mind if proven wrong or misguided. Surround yourself with intellectually diverse people and have difficult and frustrating conversations with them. Confrontation is necessary in a healthy society. Thank you.